to the first live webinar in our lunchtime series after the summer break. So we are joined today by Ruth Pearce, who is going to talk to us about social intelligence for project managers. Welcome, Ruth. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm going to stand up, actually.
Great. It's going to be an interactive workshop then. So,
yes, interactive workshop where I go from sitting to standing. So
I think all of us have been so used to working from home at the moment that we're all now starting to figure out how to stand up while we do a lot of our work at the desk for sure. So, but it also has the added benefit of making you look taller. So that's fantastic. So,
oh, I have a story for that, but we probably don't have time. So,
well, we might have time later. So welcome, Ruth. So some of you who've joined us today on the webinar may be familiar with Ruth already. We were lucky enough to join one of her workshops for the UK chapter of the PMI way back in March. And Ruth agreed to come back and represent on social intelligence for project managers for us here. And we are kicking off, like I said, our live series of webinars with Ruth in September. So I asked Ruth what would she like me to say about her, because she is a certified coach and a trainer and a motivator. But she said if she had to distill one lesson learned from her 30 years of working in everything from stock brokerage to the government, and including an investment bank, interestingly enough, she would give us one phrase: be hopeful, be strong, be brave, and be curious. And you can find out a bit more about Ruth on her LinkedIn page as well. So while we're here, and before I hand over to Ruth, I see a lot of you have already done this, so this is fantastic. You guys have a great memory from the workshops that we had back in June and earlier. Grab your phone, go to menti.com and use the code 8126455. We will present a series of questions there for you. The first couple are just from the PMI. We just, as you know, we like to know maybe what kind of an area that you work in. But as we go through the workshop with Ruth, she has a number of questions to ask you to help with engagement and to get your feedback as well on the workshop. So I will manage the Menti poll. So Ruth will give me a shout out whenever she wants me to share the page again. And other than that, I'll be in the background if Ruth needs me for anything. So I see 29 of you have already answered the question. So I think everyone's getting the handle of menti.com. So grab your phone, go to menti.com on your browser, 8126455, and without further ado, I'm going to get stuck in. Ruth, I'm going to hand over the sharing to you and we shall kick off.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so let me just get these slides up. So the truth is I asked lots of questions so that there's less presenting for me to do. And coincidentally, it gets you guys going. And it is first thing in the morning for me. So I did say to Katrina this morning that as the alarm went off, I was like, what on earth was I doing? Because when someone says, because I'm on the East Coast in the US, and when someone says to me, you know, would you be available for a lunch and learn? I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Forgetting, of course, that it's your lunch and learn and my more like pre-breakfast and learn. So it's really great to be here. I do encourage you to ask questions as we go. I know it's quite common for people to want to save their questions or to expect to save their questions. Just going to move this camera here. To expect to save their questions until the end. But what I find is very often people can't remember why it was they had the question, and I can't remember what it was I was talking about at the time. So when someone says, so on slide 3, you mentioned this, that, and the other, I'm not going to remember what was on slide 3. So ask as we go. I'm much more interested in having interaction with you than getting to the last slide in my deck. So that's really what we're here for, is for the exchange between all of us. So this is about social intelligence for project managers, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. But I'm going to start with a couple of things for us to get us going. Now, I don't know about you guys, but so for me, I've just got up, so I'm a little bit kind of, you know, got that morning stiffness thing going on. You know, you are in the middle of your day, and one of the things, I don't know how many people are familiar with Amy Cuddy, but Amy Cuddy did some research about the impact of posture on our sense of well-being and our sense of sort of powerfulness. And what she found, part of her study was later questioned, but this part still works. She found that when we take up space, when we do a powerful position, which involves broadening our shoulders, sort of lifting our chest, lifting our chin, and taking up space, either, you know, in the sort of Superwoman pose, or you can be leaning forward, but it's always with these broad shoulders and chin up. We've got the man sitting there with his feet up on the table. Now that more of us are working from home, maybe that's an option. I'm not sure that was an option for when a lot of people were in offices and workplaces. But what I invite you to do is to adopt one of these postures. I'm doing the one standing up just because I want to stand up. I was explaining to Katrina, I've started riding my bike the last few days because it's not so humid here. And let's just say there are some side effects from riding that make sitting down a little uncomfortable this morning. So anyway, we're going to adopt one of these poses. Take about, we'll do 30 seconds, but the advice is to spend about 2 minutes in this pose. Think about something that is coming up that might be a challenge, and think about overcoming that challenge, not just crossing the finish line, but getting over all the hurdles between here and the finish line, and actually visualize how you're going to handle some of the challenges. It might be a difficult meeting that's coming up, or doing a proposal for a project, or presenting the theme of the project, kicking off a project, closing a project, tackling a problem on a project, whatever it might be. But thinking about that. Or what you can do is think about a challenge you faced in the past and think about how you overcame that challenge, but adopting this posture of power. And we're just going to take a few seconds and do that now. If you happen to be joining me, I'm going to do it because it's good for me at the beginning of a talk, because people will be maybe surprised to know that it doesn't matter how many talks I give, I'm always nervous. So this gives me a moment to get grounded. And I don't know where you are at the moment, but where I am, it's super, super quiet. Even the birds and animals aren't up yet. So it's really, really quiet for a few seconds there. And an interesting piece of research that was done by Matsumoto and Tracy shows that even people who've never seen us adopt these postures of power and pride adopt these naturally. So there was a study done on congenitally blind athletes. They'd never been able to see. So, you know, they've been blind since birth. And most of them were doing things like karate and wrestling and stuff like that. But what they found was when they lost, they'd adopted a pose where there was like shame in their expression, and they took up less space. And when they won, they naturally did things like this. Positions of pride, taking up the space that we're talking about, even though they'd never seen anyone else do it. So this effect is kind of hardwired into us. The bit of the Amy Cuddy story, research that doesn't stand up or wasn't repeated successfully, was that she also tested on the enzymes in people's mouths and found that there was a change actually in the physiology. That has not been repeated by other people, but studies doing this about what the psychological effects are have been repeated. And there are many studies that show the posture we take up impacts the way we tackle, you know, and how we engage with the world. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to do, and this, after all the things I've done in all the talks I've done and workshops and everything else, this remains the most popular thing. So I could probably share this with you and then take myself back to bed. A lot of project managers are starting to print this out. This is Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. And you have just come from something. You've just been doing something else, or maybe doing nothing, and you've come to this session today. And that's typical of project managers, that we're constantly making transitions. So as we make transitions, whatever's gone before, we're taking emotions forward. We have reactions, we have responses to what we're experiencing minute by minute and hour by hour. And we tend to take those forward. If you've ever had the experience of, you know, having a rough day at work, and then the first person who speaks to you at home gets you know, the sharp edge of your tongue, even though they haven't done anything, or you open the front door and you trip over your kids' shoes because they just kicked off their shoes when they came home from school. And yes, it's annoying, and yes, it's inconsiderate, but it really doesn't warrant the response that maybe they get from you, because you're carrying forward your frustrations and your emotions from the engagements you've had during the day. So I encourage project managers who are always making these transitions to take a pause between transitions and do a check-in. And this is, as I said, Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. It's on Wikipedia Commons, and it's in multiple languages. So if anyone's got international teams, then you can get it in other languages as well. And I encourage you to just take a few seconds, look at the wheel, and think about a couple of things. One is, what emotions are you feeling in this moment? And we're not asking you to share your emotions on this particular slide. This is just something for you to think about. What emotions are you experiencing in this moment? And look for two things. One is, you're going to be experiencing multiple emotions. We don't come along one emotion at a time, even though sometimes we think we do. And the other is that we may be experiencing conflicting emotions about the same thing or about different things. So I mentioned to Katrina that today is actually the 20th anniversary of my dad dying. And so there's some sadness today. I'm also happy to be here with you. I'm slightly apprehensive because it's a presentation, but I'm also experiencing anticipation because once I get into a presentation, you know, I enjoy it. I'm experiencing all those things at the same time. I'm not an either or. So I'm going to, again, give you a pause, let you think about it and consider, make a note to yourself what emotions you notice, because we're going to do something at the end that people tend to find quite interesting. So I'm just going to shut up for a moment and let you think about that. So we've done two things so far that don't seem to necessarily be anything to do with social intelligence, and yet I would say they are. First of all, remembering our posture, remembering who we are, what space we take up. And that can be positive or negative space, that when we're with other people, we take up space in the room. And are we taking up the appropriate space in the room? It comes down to things like talking and engaging with people. Are we talking over people? Are we inviting other people to contribute? So being aware of that space that we take up. Someone once said to me, they wanted me not to speak in a meeting because I took up a lot of space in the room. And they wanted me actually to, you know, be quiet and adopt more of a sort of passive posture. It didn't work out very well, but because, you know, you may be able to tell already that that didn't sit too well with me, but that they were aware that that I took up space and that sometimes meant there was less space for other people, which was definitely something for me to be aware of. And then that emotions check-in, knowing where you are on that emotions wheel is the first step to being sensitive to other people. Because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know what you're conveying to other people, because we know that we are wired to connect. Whatever's going on, people pick up on that. They may not be able to name it. They may not be able to put a word to what it is they're picking up from you, but they pick up things from you. And so those two things that we just did are an opportunity for you to manage what is being put out from you into the world. So why does any of this matter? Well, we have lots of research that shows, mainly from Gallup, but there are other organizations, Atlassian and people like that have shown that workforce disengagement is just the same now as it's always been. It's high. It doesn't seem to be getting particularly worse, but it isn't getting better either. So about 70% of the workforce worldwide are disengaged. In some countries it's worse than that, and in other countries it's slightly better. What we see is that similarly 70% of turnover that occurs in workplaces is related to the relationship people have with their manager. So people join companies and they leave managers, and that's us. So there's another 70% there. We've got 70% of people are disengaged, 70% of people who leave an organization, it's because of the interaction they have with their manager. We also know from VIA research that 70% of people really are quite unaware of what it is they bring to the table. what their strengths are. In my case, I focus on character strengths, but this could be talents, skills. Yes, we know there are the people who, are full of themselves and they seem to think they're God's gift to everybody. But most people actually think they are less than and are not aware of the tremendous gifts that they bring to the workplace, to their team, to their family. And of course, guess what? All of this applies to us. It isn't just them that is 70% disengaged. Project managers are 70% disengaged. Project managers are having a struggle with their managers, maybe their project sponsors, whoever it is. So project managers are facing those same challenges in the relationships, and project managers are strengths blind. So it's not just about us engaging with other people, it's about us understanding ourselves, which is what those first two slides were about. What we also know on the other side is that people who know their strengths are more engaged, significantly more engaged at work. They're more productive. They're actually less likely to cause errors and rework. They report higher levels of well-being and happiness in the workplace and in general. And they report having better relationships, and other people confirm that the relationships they have with people, when they're aware and using their strengths, are much better. So just increasing awareness of strengths, and we're going to get into how to do that in a moment, has these really positive results for the individual and for the organization. So I'm going to ask you this question. This is the first Menti question. What's the difference, do you think, between emotional intelligence, which people talk about quite a lot, and social intelligence, which doesn't get quite so much airplay? I'll give you a moment to think about that. And you're going to share the Menti slide.
Yep. So guys, if you grab your phone and just go back into menti.com, 8126455, and that first question, what is the difference between emotional and social intelligence in your opinion? So what's the difference? So hopefully you can see that. We've got quite a few people joining us today, so hopefully we'll get some good questions.
Do you want to share your screen, Katrina, so we can see the answers coming up?
Okay. Yep, let me just share it now. Sorry, I was just waiting for some answers to come up before I share it.
Yeah, so that first person doesn't have to go, oh, that's my answer.
Yeah, it's just me. Thank you. There you go.
One navigates our own feelings, the other is how to approach others. Don't know. Social intelligence is a new term for me. Excellent. Emotional intelligence, about empathy. Social intelligence, about awareness. Social would be more streetwise. Nice description. Emotional, person in touch with own feelings and others. Emotional intelligence, more what's in your head. Social intelligence, how you act and behave. Really nice definition. Hopefully I can get a copy of these afterwards, Katrina, because they'll be interesting to share with other people. Internal versus external awareness.
And for the attendees as well, we always share a copy of the
Perfect.
as well, so everyone will get a copy, including you.
So we've got emotional intelligence is a lower level of social intelligence. I like that. EM focuses focus on other. SI focus on self. Interesting. Social is the people around you. Emotional is internal. Yeah, so you're kind of getting the feel for what the difference is between these two. So emotional intelligence is about us being aware of ourselves and managing our reactions and our responses and our interactions, what we put out into the world. And social intelligence, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now. Hopefully. Social intelligence is more about not just our interaction with the world, so what we put out there and what we take in from other people, but also how we impact the relationship between people, and how we impact those integrations of team members, and how we either sort of grease the wheels or get in the way of people being effective in pairs, in groups within our team and our stakeholders even. So the social intelligence one is much more of a sort of cross. It's a bit like that communications diagram you see, where every time you add a person, it doubles the number of interactions, because there are more people to have cross connections with, and that social intelligence is partly how we facilitate that. So how would you define social intelligence? Back to you, back to Menti. Some definitions for social intelligence after what I've just said. You're muted, Katrina.
That will be the way it's going to go for the next hour. Forget to mute. Yeah, so you can see my screen there. I'm putting no because it's two-step process. Share and share again. Here you go.
Understand to others, awareness on how I'm perceived by co-workers, awareness of impact on others, connecting a cross-section of people you work with. You guys are good. You're listening. I'm not listening to myself. So you're hearing what I'm saying, which is excellent. Aware of how others feel, being aware of your context, how I interact with society, ability to interact sensitively, yeah, and to cultivate an environment where other people can interact sensitively. So it's building that environment, that context where we can all bring our best. Two-way channel of awareness, yeah, and it's actually a multi-channel awareness, you know, of observing how people are interacting with each other, not just how we're interacting one-on-one with them. Some people break it out into emotional intelligence about us, relational or relationship intelligence is about our one-on-one interactions, and then social intelligence is that broader, you know, how do we and others interact with a group. So, terrific. I will go back to my, all right, so another pop quiz for you guys. Wow, this is going to get, oh no, so social, I thought we were on to the next question, but we're not. All right, so social intelligence, some descriptions of what that is. It's about motives and feelings, ours and other people's. It's about fitting in, you know, so being sensitive to the context and environment you're in and adapting, reading the code. People call it code switching. Putting others at their ease, so doing things that accommodates the other person and what makes them comfortable, not always seeing the world and sort of pushing the world from where we're at. Conveying information with sensitivity, so it comes to that communication thing, understanding how our communications land on other people. Building connections, again, not just between us and others, but helping people to build connections between each other. Having that sort of people savviness, that sensitivity, you know, we all know people where we say, you know, they just seem to be able to read the room. That is social intelligence at work. So what is the golden rule? Making you guys work today because it's the middle of the day for you and early in the day for me. What is the golden rule?
There, I think I'm getting the hang of that now. So guys, if you pop back into Menti, you'll see, I would say most of us know what the golden rule is, but it's probably going to be a bit of a memory jog. Because when I initially saw this question, I was like, oh, that's a bit out of place in here, but
interesting.
Oh, no, it's really quite appropriate for what we're talking about.
Put others before yourself. Think of how others feel. Do unto others as you would like done unto you. Thank you. Yes, it's all of these things, but the actual quote is, do unto others as you would like done unto you. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. I'm a big one on stories. About, this is 20 years ago now, actually more than, because it was before I moved to the US. Read the tea leaves, I like that. Yeah, so just before I moved to the US, actually we were celebrating the fact that I'd been offered a job and the company over here was sponsoring me for a visa and all of that. And a friend of mine said, I'm going to take you out to celebrate. So this is really exciting. And she said, leave it all to me. I know exactly what we're going to do. And she made this arrangement that we would go out for dinner. So we met up, we went somewhere, had a quick drink, and then we went to a steakhouse. One of the, not so well known over here in the States, but in the UK, it was a well-known place in London. And she took me in, we looked at the menu, and there was steak and shellfish on the menu, and of course, you know, sides and all of that kind of stuff. So this was great. We sat down and she said, what do you want? And I ordered a baked potato and a side of broccoli because I'm vegetarian. I'm actually pescatarian, but I'm allergic to shellfish. So I can eat regular fish, but not shellfish. And the whole menu was fish, steak, fish, steak, fish, steak, 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 steak done any way you wanted it. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm vegetarian. And she said, well, oh, if I'd realized, now she'd known me for years. And actually when she paused and thought about it, she realized that she knew she had that knowledge that I was vegetarian, but she'd been thinking about what she would like done for her. And it was a very nice gesture. She wanted to take me out for dinner. We had a nice time, but literally my celebratory meal was baked potato and extremely expensive broccoli. So that is what can happen when we think about the golden rule, doing unto others as we would be done unto. So I'm not actually going to flip back to my slides. I think, can you go on to the next question and we'll just skip a slide? So what do you think the platinum rule is?
No, so this one was new for me. I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah, so, well, knowing what the golden rule is, extrapolate.
Yes.
What do people think the platinum rule is? This phrase was coined by a guy called Tony Alessandra. He coaches and trains people. Never heard of it? Excellent. That's why you came to this session. Reacting and adjusting to situations. Treat others the way they would like to be treated. Okay, who's the person who snuck into the room that came to the previous presentation? But this is great though. So it's right. Yes, treat others as they would like to be treated is the platinum rule. So rather than taking me to a steakhouse, asking me what kind of restaurant is your favorite restaurant, and we'd have been going out for Indian. Yes, based on Ruth's story, treat others the way they want to be treated. So spot on, well done. So we'll flip back to the presentation, and I will skip those couple of slides. All right, so we've got our platinum rule. And just get through here. We're going to treat others as they want to be treated. So what's a challenge in that? There's no Menti question for this one. Think about what is the challenge in treating others as they want to be treated. I'll answer my own question in the interest of time. How do we know? How do we know how other people want to be treated? So this brings us back to social. Sorry, you're muted again, Katrina.
No, we're not.
Oh, no, you're not. Okay.
I'm just going to say that people can also pop any comments into the chat, and they can also, guys, you can also use the Q&A in Zoom as well. Just so if you do want to pipe up and say something, feel free, and we'll
I really miss Irish humour. Look at that. So Sarah says she was very shellfish. You must be related to my father, because that's the kind of painful joke that he would have shared. So thank you very much. I feel like he's here with us now. Thank you for that, Sarah. If I was to do that in the US, and I don't mean to stereotype or generalize, but typically people would be like, what's that got to do with anything? You know, they wouldn't make those word plays are not so common here. So, all right. So this social intelligence helps us with this. I mean, one of the things we want to be able to do is actually ask people. It would be nice to be asked, how do you want to celebrate? What's your favorite kind of restaurant? But also social intelligence helps us to sort of read what's going on. It helps us to understand what makes others tick. It helps us to register when they tell us information, like maybe in passing, someone says to you, oh, I'm vegetarian, you know, and in 3 months' time, maybe that becomes a relevant piece of information. So being able to make a note of that, file it away, and make the connections so that you can show a personal connection to the person that you're engaging with, which comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the emotions. It's easier to engage someone if we've got this sort of awareness, we're paying attention to the clues that they're giving about what they need in order to interact effectively with us. Sounds like a lot of work, but as we practice it, it gets easier. What are some benefits? Why do we care? Why does social intelligence matter? And this is one of my favorite pictures. This is elephants, which I always share. I actually have an elephant tattoo. I'm a big elephant fan. You might be able to see in the picture behind me, the things hanging down by the windows, they're chains of elephants from India. I visited India in 2015. And I love elephants because they are the epitome of social intelligence. They're also a matriarchal society, which I really, really like. But the main thing is their social intelligence is enormous. They care deeply for each other as a group, and will work together as a group. Like if a baby gets stuck in a mud hole, they will work together to get that baby elephant out of the mud. The other interesting thing is that when one herd of elephants comes across another herd of elephants that's led by a younger female that might be considered, you know, sort of inexperienced, the older female in the one herd will take the younger one under her wing and kind of train her, mentor her, and they will integrate the herd until that younger elephant, you know, has a better clue as to how to run the team. And sometimes the herds just mingle and they stay together, and sometimes eventually they do separate once the younger elephant has learned the tricks of the trade and knows how to protect their herd. But we also find that social intelligence for us, people with higher social intelligence report a pleasurable life. They feel that connection with other people. They tend to feel more buffered against stress and trauma, because they have more reserves that they're surrounded by, and they're more likely to exhibit positive group behavior. So bringing us back to teams and organizations, people high in social intelligence are likely to interact better with their teams and show positive group behavior. They also encourage positive group behavior by what they model. So Andy Crow did a study of effective project managers, did a 360 review with the people they work with, the people that they work for, the customers that they serve. And he showed that good project managers, effective project managers, spend 90% of their time communicating. And yet in the US, Atlassian did a study where 59% of US workers said communication is the biggest obstacle at work. So one of my favorite questions is always, are we communicating 90% of the time because that is necessary, or because we just aren't actually always terribly good at it? Keep that question in mind. And that last one I throw in there, it's from a survey that I did, that 90% of PMs believe they're essential to projects, and 75% of their team members agree. Now, if you're of a positive disposition, you go, well, that's great. That gap isn't very big. And if you're more negative, like my father would have been, he would have said, well, that's a 15% gap, that we think we're more important than they do. So just something to think about. That's just a bonus piece of information. So getting to our social intelligence, we can actually measure it. And finally, we get to character strengths, my passion. I'm just going to keep an eye on time. So social intelligence is one of the 24 VIA character strengths and virtues. These were researched by 2 scientists in the US in the early 2000s, but they researched across the world and found that there are 24 strengths that are universally recognized across cultures, across religions, across languages, you name it, they're recognized. They had some scientists who went out to really remote places, that really haven't interacted with the sort of industrialized world, and checked out with these tribes, what did they hold dear? And they all recognized these 24 strengths as being positive, useful, and they're things that we can express without being detrimental to someone else. So they're not zero-sum games. If I'm showing perspective, it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily stomping on your zest. Now, there is some risk that we can overuse some of our strengths. We'll come to that in a moment. But if they're used well, if we're all using our strengths well, then we are uplifting the world. We're uplifting each other. We're making space for each other to be the best that we can be. So we can measure social intelligence as one of those 24 strengths. You've got the link here. If you haven't taken the assessment already, I think some people have taken it already, but I'm just going to use the same link that I provided when I did the UK presentation. And one of the things I can share when people have taken the assessment is we can actually do a group profile and see what this group looks like. What do you share and what do you not? So when I do this measurement with project managers, a group of project managers, it's 461 project managers. They were from around the world, but I will say that, probably 60% of them were from the US, just because that was where my network was. We noticed a couple of things. So the blue line is where people rank the strengths on average in the US, which is very similar to the rest of the world. There are some subtle differences, but it's a good proxy. So we see that honesty, for example, is rated as a high strength by many more people than self-regulation. So self-regulation doesn't show up as a top strength in those 24 in that ranking very often. Honesty does much more often. So honesty, fairness, kindness, judgment, and curiosity are the 5 strengths that are most commonly reported in the top 5 for someone in their ranking. Yeah, we'll share the survey link again, Josh, at the end. And and then self-regulation, the ones that you see on the right, zest, spirituality, prudence, humility, self-regulation, those are the ones that people least often report as a top strength. So, and those top strengths are what we call signature strengths. They're your go-to strengths that show up all the time. So what we see from this graph is, Social intelligence, that orange line is my project managers, my 461, sample of 461 project managers. Social intelligence was lower on average for them than for people around them. And as you can see from that graph, significantly lower. So social intelligence, we've been talking about how it greases the wheels and helps people work well together, helps us help other people work well together. It seems as though social intelligence is not something that is typically reported, not even as the same level of strength as the people that we're working with. It's reported lower than other people. So it's generally ranked around 11 in the world at large, and we're more likely to rank it around 19 or lower. We do have some super strengths though, ones that show up much stronger than other people. So the really high peak that you see there on the left-hand side of this circle is perseverance. So we're high in tend to be high in perseverance. Now remember, this is averages. So there are going to be individuals. If you take your survey, you may find that perseverance is your lowest strength and self-regulation and social intelligence are your top two. That's the individual result. But when we look on average across these project managers that I was able to survey, we see that perseverance shows up high, forgiveness shows up high, and prudence shows up high. Now, prudence is the planning strength. So it shows up higher than it does for people around us. Prudence is the planning strength, and it's also typically reported as a low strength for people. So kind of reassuring that project managers, part of what they do is planning, have a higher level on average than other people of the planning strength. So that's kind of, have there been other surveys like this one? If you mean my assessment, so using the character strengths to assess particular groups of people like project managers, it's been done for other groups. Some people have looked at things like lawyers and so on. If you're talking about the actual survey, the VIA survey, whether there are other ones like that, the one that people are most familiar with is usually Gallup-Clifton Strengths, used to be called StrengthsFinder. The difference between the two surveys, two key differences. One is this one is backed by a lot of research, whereas the Gallup one, the VIA one is research-based. You can use the algorithm. I've got access, anyone can get access to do research with the algorithm and test it out with people. So it's been validated over and over again, whereas the Gallup one is proprietary. So the only people who validate the results are Gallup. And the second thing is that Gallup is very focused on the workplace. The VIA character strengths are life strengths. So they tend to show up everywhere. Your top strengths tend to go with you whatever you're doing. And my top strengths are appreciation of beauty and excellence, bravery, curiosity, fairness, and gratitude. Whatever I'm doing, those strengths are going around with me. It doesn't matter whether I'm at work or just having an average day. So, so these are the things that we notice. So here's our next Menti question. Perseverance, I highlighted that one as one that we are higher than other people in, quite significantly on average. So what are some possible pitfalls of perseverance in the world of the project manager?
And while people are answering that, Ruth, there is a question in the Q&A as well.
I just noticed that, yeah. How do you ensure that you don't become the person who always pleases others to their own detriment? So this actually leads quite nicely into this character strengths thing. I mean, we're only going to touch on it today, but one of the things we find is that when people optimize the use of their character strengths, it both protects them and protects others. So kindness is one, for example, where kindness can drift into being sort of self-damaging and being too accommodating of other people, not really setting boundaries and everything else. That would be an overuse of kindness. An overuse of fairness can do that as well. But people are so concerned about being fair to everybody that it's hard to move anything forward, you know, because there's always, well, someone else's voice is what we should hear. You hear that a lot on projects, right? Oh, so-and-so's not in the room, so we can't really make a decision. Now, sometimes we didn't have the best people in the room. Other times it's just that we always want to ask one more person, you know, and we kind of get stuck in that. Let's check some more, let's check some more. Teamwork is another one. When people overuse teamwork, it can get to the point where they can't do anything independently. They always need the input of someone else. So that would be overuse of teamwork. So there are many ways that our strengths can potentially get in our way, and our top ranked strengths are the ones we tend to use a little bit too much. So I'm high in curiosity when I'm in a stressful situation in a group, which I haven't been in quite a long time because I basically am closeted away in my house, which is fine with me. But when I'm in a group, I will literally bombard people with questions. How did you get here? Where are you from? How many kids do you have? Are you married? How long have you been married? Where did you go to school? You know, and they're sort of backing up against the wall saying, make it stop. That's me overusing my curiosity because I'm under stress. So fortunately, I'm aware of that and I can moderate it a little bit. So what are we seeing? Pig-headed, pig-headed rep, I like that. Can't recognize a lost cause, not knowing when to call it a day, poor time management, being seen by your peers as being pushy. Ooh, palimpsest, nice word. Missing opportunities, becoming too bullish, burnout. Yeah, all of these things. Task over people focus, not recognizing when the approach needs to change, missing a change in project conditions. Yeah, absolutely. This is perseverance, the risk of perseverance. And I'm going to just grab back the screen because taking those strengths, great job. Everyone's so engaged. I really, really appreciate it because there's nothing worse than me asking questions and nothing. So, so great social intelligence, everybody. That's why I miss people from Ireland and the UK and Europe in general. So pros and cons of our strengths. So I said that our super strengths are prudence, perseverance, and forgiveness. By super strengths, I mean we tend to rank them higher than other people. Doesn't necessarily mean they are our top strengths, but we do rank them higher than other people. So the advantages: prudence is the planning strength. I already mentioned that. Perseverance is the keep going strength. Just because there's an obstacle doesn't mean that we all pack up and go home. And forgiveness, we're focused on how do we move forward from here. We're not looking to blame people. We're not playing the blame game. We're really just paying attention to, okay, so we got to where we are. What's our next step? So those are some of the advantages. But what if we overuse some of these strengths that we are strong in? And we may feel inclined to counter other people's lack of prudence and perseverance and forgiveness. So it might drive us to use these strengths even more because it's like we don't see it in other people and we feel like we've got to plug the gaps. So with our prudent strength, we can get into planning paralysis or analysis paralysis. And I know project managers who love planning and have almost an anxiety attack when it comes to execution. You know, they don't feel good about execution. They're always saying, well, we need to look at one more thing. We need to evaluate, we need to do more, you know, risk assessment and everything else. They're not that comfortable moving into the, okay, let's get it done and face some of those obstacles we're going to see. I, on the other hand, am an implementation project manager. The planning, I know we have to do it and I force myself to do it, but I'm not very smiley about it. When we get to execution, I am dancing in the moment. Oh, we've got an obstacle, never mind. I'm sure we'll figure it out how we can do that. You know, so that I'm energized by the implementation piece. And so that's a question I have for people is it worth thinking about having different project managers at different stages of the project? Of course, continuity is really helpful, but there may be a transition point where some of your super planners may not be your super implementers, and that's okay. We don't necessarily have to be equally brilliant at all parts of the project cycle. And if we have a passion for the planning or we have a passion for the implementing, that's okay as well, because we're more likely to be engaged if we're engaging our passion most of the time. It doesn't have to be all the time. Perseverance, we won't stop. You know, the writing's on the wall. This project is no longer relevant. Spending bad money after good, sunk cost fallacy. You know, we've invested all of this already, and so we should see it to the end, even though it doesn't have the value we thought it was going to. That's the perseverance risk. And then forgiveness, interestingly, is as much as root cause analysis is really important to us, we may have a tendency to skip it because we don't want to get into the blame game. What did anyone do? You know, how did this come about? So we may not get deeply enough into the root of problems. And so the problems may repeat themselves. So if you've ever had that thing of being in a project, you've done your post-mortem, lovely phrase at the end, come up with all the ways that, you know, the project could have been done better and the next project happens and all the same things happen again. It's because we're not really getting, you know, making a list of what worked and what didn't. That's one part of it. But it's also that, okay, so what will we do differently? What will we do differently to prevent this happening again? And sometimes it is recognizing that, you know, someone's in the wrong role and they need to be doing something else. It isn't always just, you know, happenstance or whatever. So, you know, no blame's great, but we do need to get to the root cause of things. So we're going to do a quick strength spotting exercise. And everyone's going to be like, what? We've only just heard about character strengths. You're going to find it's actually pretty simple. I am not using a project management example. So it's something that, you know, hopefully we can all kind of connect to, because if I use a project management example, someone's going to say, yeah, I don't do those kind of projects. So it starts with you. How can you build this social intelligence? How can you build it for help other people to start building it? And I say it starts with you being aware of yourself and other people. And we're going to use what's called the SEA method, S-E-A. You're going to see the strengths. And going forward, not in this instance, but this is just going to help you practice spotting strengths. So you're going to see the strengths and you're going to explain what you saw. So what was the behavior that demonstrated that strength? And then you're going to explain why you appreciate it. So yeah, I noticed that you were really kind. Well, why do you care? Why does it matter that they were really kind? Jackie's asked, have there been Indian people? Who does the assessment? People do assess themselves, but we also encourage people to do 360s so they can give out the questionnaire to other people. And there's lots of work you can do around blind spots. If you're demonstrating strengths other people consistently see and you're not aware of them. So there's lots of great stuff we can do with comparisons of what other people see versus what you see. Is there a questionnaire? Reasons for questions. So it would be very interested in PMI looking to do this type of survey of ourselves. Well, that would be cool. We can talk about that, Jackie. I actually, in full disclosure, I actually work part-time for VIA now. I cyber-stalked them after I started using their assessment, and it was so successful. Some of what I did is in my book, Be a Project Motivator, but I did it with a big team that was in multiple locations, and it was so impactful that I was like, I want to work for these people. So I kept connecting with them and sending them messages and all that. And finally, they needed a project manager. So they said, hey, we need a part-time project manager. Do you want to come and work for us? And I was like, hell yes. So I managed to get myself, took me 2 years to do it. And I've been working with them for nearly 3. But yeah, they finally gave in and accepted a date from me, which is really cool. So you're going to see, explain, and appreciate when you do this with other people. Today, we're going to focus on the seeing piece. So I am going to help you out by putting up this little chart. We're going to use this story. I've already mentioned we're going to use a story. This chart has all 24 character strengths on it. And I want you to look at this as I read this story and see what strengths you notice. Now, we are going to collect your answers in Menti afterwards because that can be fun. We can make a word cloud out of it. And I share the word cloud. So this is from a colleague of mine who's in a class with me. Her name is Steina. She lives in Reykjavik in Iceland. And she shared this story and has given permission for me to use this short story with you guys or with anybody. But what I like to do is I love to collect the word cloud of the strengths of people here and send it to her. About 2 or 3 times a year, I send her an update and say, look, this is what your story is doing and this is what people see. So listen to the story, think about what strengths you see. If you don't want to wait till the Menti thing comes up, you can do it. Or actually, you can probably have Menti open at the moment, right, Katrina, on that slide? Yeah, so you can put your answers into Menti and then we'll move on to the slide and see, we'll move and see what it is that you've picked. All right, the impact of a heart attack on my understanding of strengths and mindfulness. In last week, our 2nd week in the course, my husband had a heart attack. He is a strong man and came walking home from work in the morning after being there for an hour or 2. He said he felt heaviness in his chest and pain in the jaws and left shoulder. Did I think he should go to a doctor? I thought so, and I drove him to the hospital near us. He was immediately put on an ambulance. I insisted to go with him, and we went to Reykjavik on blue lights. In the ambulance, we stayed relatively calm and talked and joked. I had my hand on his head to calm us both. But I will never forget the moment when I lost that calm and the reality of the situation became clear. I looked forward. I sat in the behind, out of the front window, and saw the biggest traffic road in Reykjavik, Miklabraut, empty. The police had closed all intersections with police cars with blinking blue lights, and we drove on priority speed straight to the cardiology department. He was treated for 100% and 90% blocked coronary arteries, and in less than an hour it was all over and he sat laughing in his hospital bed. In the meantime, I had first collapsed, shaking and with tears, as soon as he was in the hands of the doctors. Then I sat and waited in a quiet room. I didn't have a phone, so I could not call our children and parents. I decided to be in the moment, even if this was a hard one, and sat down and turned my chair to the window and had another moment I think I will never forget. Out of the window, I saw Hallgrímskirkja, one of the defining buildings in Reykjavik. In the foreground were big bristlecone pines, and the sun was coming up. The time was between 11 and 12 when it is still mostly dark in Iceland this time of year. Lovely winter light, yellow, pink, light blue, cold but beautiful light. It started snowing, these big rare snowflakes that we call hundslafadriffa in Icelandic, dog's paw snow, and even more rare, no wind. The snowflakes floated down calmly. It was such a powerful yet peaceful moment. I felt like the universe had made this scene just for me to calm me down. I accepted it, looked inwards, and tried to sort out what I was feeling. Even if I was worried, I trusted he was in the best hands. Then he came up, laughing as I said, and since then I've been overwhelmed with a feeling of gratitude. I'm thankful to all the people who took part in the healthcare, the ambulance drivers, the people who stopped at the intersection. I appreciate that the weather was harmless and the roads almost clean. In the days before, the road was closed because of snow and storm, and later this day it snowed a lot. I'm glad I was home when my mate came home, or he might have had a nap instead of seeking help. A lot to be thankful for. I'm even grateful for not having my phone. If I had, I would have missed the wonderful window moment and made myself and others worry about the situation. Instead, I called everyone afterwards with good news. Then when life got back to normal in a few days, I took up my mindfulness practice, and I noticed that the gratitude spilled over into most of what I did. For example, in the practice of doing something routine mindfully, such as showering, I felt gratitude to parts of my body I don't normally give any thanks, like my toes. And in the shop, I appreciate all the selection of all kinds and think of all the people and the work involved. I'm not trying, it just spills over. So, what strengths did you hear in that story? And this is where I take my chance and find this is the one that you didn't answer. Wow, look at that. So we've got spirituality, honesty, kindness, self-regulation, gratitude, love, hope, appreciation of beauty, bravery, teamwork, prudence. Absolutely amazing. Great job, everybody. And you notice that between us all, we've probably noticed, I don't know, 2/3 of the strengths on that chart. So would it surprise you to know that she finishes the story by saying, you are supposed to show your strongest character strengths in time of crises. But surprisingly, the strengths I think we used and helped us most were humour, hope, love, and not least perseverance. 4 strengths. She's aware of 4 strengths. And this is someone who practices, like me, is a character strengths practitioner. You have just spotted character strengths in someone's story, both just having heard about them, what they are, and you noticed more strengths than she did, someone who has been doing this for a long time, practicing with character strengths for a long time. You can do this for other people. And I recommend, especially when you're going to meetings, particularly boring meetings, instead of having your phone under the desk, well, now, of course, you're at home, so you can sort of, a lot of you are going to be at home, I'm sure, you can sneak a look. But instead of sneaking a look at what's going on social media, seeing what the latest news is about the ridiculousness in America and laughing at us, whatever it is that you do to distract yourself when people are boring you in a meeting, have the list of character strengths in front of you, and you can get it from the VIA website, and listen for those strengths in what people are saying. Even the most boring meeting becomes interesting when you listen to the speaker for their strengths, and then make a point of going and explaining what you saw or heard and appreciating it. Could be by an email, could be by a text, could be by a phone call, could be in person, whatever. Do that for one person a day. It can be a family member, can be a friend. It can be, you can spot strengths in movies with your favorite characters, but see what strengths you get used to spotting. Explain what you see to people. So I saw that when you did, so they know what behavior to repeat. You know, I saw kindness when you said you would help out so-and-so who's having a problem at home at the moment or whatever it is, and then why you appreciate it, which helps us all move forward because that person needs some support in this moment and they felt cared for. So what did you see? How did you see it? So explain how you saw it and why you appreciate it. Try that for a week. One person a day, one strength a day. You don't have to spot all their strengths like we did here. Just do one strength a day for a person and see what happens. Check in with yourself and see how you feel. Oh, we've just done that one. See how you feel as you're doing the strength sharing, and then see what their reaction is, and see what happens as time goes on. I'm not sharing my screen, am I? And I can't seem to get the share button up. See what happens as time goes on and you keep doing it, because you'll see an interesting effect that takes place if you consistently do that over a period of time. So just to sum up, I know we've only got a couple more minutes, and I do want to do the last check-in. So recap on social intelligence: it protects us against stressors, helps us build connection and effective communications. As you become aware of people's character strengths, you can even learn to modify your communications to align more with their character strengths so that they hear your message more clearly. So appreciation of beauty and excellence. You open something with, you know, so-and-so did an amazing job, and I'm all over that email. You send me something saying, I want you to do something, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get to that later. So you're appealing to my character strength. Or, Ruth, you might be interested in this. Oh my God, curiosity gets going. What is it? You know, so those little things can make a difference in how people receive your communication. We've talked about how social intelligence can be measured. We've talked about how you can very easily start to spot strengths in other people and build your awareness of them and also their awareness of themselves. So I encourage you to spot strengths and share. And now I'm going to give you this check-in again. Again, we're not collecting this on Menti. This is just for you to do a check-in. So we did it at the beginning. You're familiar with it. It's Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. Actually, maybe some people didn't see it at the beginning. I want you to think now about what emotions, as we transition out of this session and into the rest of the day, what emotions are you experiencing in this moment? And remember, they may be conflicting emotions, and you're probably feeling multiple emotions. So I'm going to give you a pause and be quiet for a moment. I would love it if you would put in the chat just a yes or no if your emotions changed from the beginning. So just yes or no. Did your emotions change? No judgment about, you know, whether they're better or worse. Yes, 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 no. Okay, sorry about that. Don't know. No. All right, so for some people, their emotions changed. For more people than not, it appears the emotions changed. So what's curious about that? Did we spend a lot of time talking about your emotions? No. Did we get you to share your emotions and say, well, what do you want to do about them? No. We talked about social intelligence, which has an emotional component, but we didn't talk about your emotions. We didn't unpack your emotions. We didn't say, where do you want to go with your emotions? We just had you think about it at the beginning. We talked about something else for about 50 minutes. And then we came back and did a check-in on your emotions. For some of you, your emotions had changed. The reason I do this is for those of you who experience that change, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it happens without you paying attention to it. So what often happens to us is we think that we're going to be stuck in an emotion forever. I remember what it felt like when I heard that my father died, and I thought I was going to be stuck in that intense grief for forever and ever and ever. I would never smile again. He died suddenly. So it was a complete surprise. I was in the US, he was in the UK, and totally shocked. And 20 years later, yes, I still feel grief and sadness about that. And I feel joy about things and ecstasy about things and admiration and terror and fear and anger and anticipation and interest and boredom and all of these things. You don't have to spend a lot of time focusing on your emotions. Just focus on something and your emotions will change from minute to minute, hour to hour, all by themselves. And that's something else to be aware of. If someone engages with you in a way and you're not happy about how the emotions you showed or the emotions they showed, it's like the weather, it's going to change. We are not one thing, we're not stuck there. So with that, I am going to say thank you very much and hand back to Katrina, our glorious host. If anyone has any questions, you can email me. Love it if you would purchase the book, Be a Project Motivator. It's on Amazon, on Kindle and paperback and audiobook. Really nice narrator. And yeah, you can email me at ruthpearce@projectmotivator.com if you have questions that you want to follow up. Thank you, Mike. I'll stop my share.
Right, yep.
And then
share here. Hopefully you guys will be able to see this. Okay, so actually, if anyone does have any more questions for Ruth, just pop them into the chat or the Q&A there, and I'll do a little bit of closeout, which most of you are well used to again at this stage. So, and I did get this question from one of you already. So, as usual, if you registered with your PMI member number and you're attending here at the moment, we will take care of the recording of the PDUs for you. And in this case, it's half a leadership and half a strategic PDU for attending the webinar. So that will be taken care of for you. And you can go ahead and auto register if you want. The code is right there. We will also share the recording and the slides. And as Ruth mentioned earlier, we will share the link to the survey is actually already in the registration, but we will reshare it on the archive, and we will also share the results of the Menti poll as well, so you'll have access to all of that afterwards as usual, essentially. So because we're back after the summer break, we already have quite a few live webinars lined up for you. The next one, actually, we've got 2 more coming up in September, Getting to the Heart of Change next week, and How to Get Fired at Sea Level, which is Peter Taylor coming back to do a reprise. How to have having fun as a project manager, I think, is what we had with Peter back in April. So check out the calendar of events on the PMI webpage. You can register for them there. Don't forget, you also can use projectmanagement.com for any of the webinars that are up there. And because of the whole lockdown situation that we're in at the moment, a lot of the European chapters are sharing their recordings of webinars as well. So, and some of those are in different languages, which is, I know, useful to a lot of our members because you speak more than just English. So you have a lot of opportunities there. So it just leaves me to Ruth. I don't think we have any more questions there. Anything you would like to add before I say?
Nope, just thank you very much for having me. And I did put the link to the survey in the chat as well for anyone who's still in the room. So.
Yeah. So, okay, guys, that is everything. Ruth, thank you so much. I'm delighted that you got a chance to present for us, and it sounds like there's a lot of food for thought there. So we will follow up with everyone, make sure you get access to that survey as well. So thanks, everyone, and thanks, Ruth. Have a great day.
Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thank you.